Okay, welcome to our call on the gut-brain connection. If this is a new topic for you, you are in for like a whole new world of learning, and your brain will be blown, or maybe it's your gut that will be blown. I'm not sure. Either way, you're going to learn so much that's going to help your health. And I'm honored to be able to introduce Lori Bore today, who is an amazing mom of a lot of children. And I can't remember how many children she has, but a lot of children, some of which you had six children, some of which you had some serious health challenges that drove her to the world of natural remedies. It's a very similar story, except I only have 2 kids. But anyway, she's amazing. You're going to learn so much from her, and she loves this topic. So with that, Lori, I am going to put you on now.
Thank you. And I do love this topic, and it's one of those things that I could talk about forever. And I'm just so grateful that you all are here. And I've got to push buttons to make sure I'm looking at people and not myself, because that's more fun to talk to you guys. All right. Hippocrates said all disease begins in the gut, and he's correct. He's right. And now things are getting popular where we're starting to talk about this. For the past probably 5 years, mainstream people have started doing research into this, but those of us who have been crunchy for decades know that we have been talking about this since day one. So it is common and it is comfortable for our thinking to think about the gut being linked to weight, and the gut being linked to immunity, and the gut being linked to even hormones and physical disease. But so many of us have not thought through, or were unaware that the gut is linked to the brain. And that's probably actually a bigger deal in the whole scheme of things than the gut being linked to all of those other things, although it's all true. He wasn't wrong about all disease. So people seem surprised to learn this, and yet are they really? Because our language has reflected this for years. We talk about something that's gut-wrenching, a gut-wrenching decision that we have to make, or a situation we're in. Have you ever had a gut feeling about something? Have you ever said that you were sick to your stomach over something that was worrying you? Have you ever felt like you got a punch in the gut or a kick in the gut? Have you ever had butterflies in your stomach, right? So inherently, when we look at this, we know that this is true, that the gut and the brain are connected. These days, especially in the US, but it's starting to become common all over the world, everybody's got a diagnosis. Have you noticed this? Like, everybody's got a diagnosis, and a lot of people are married to their diagnosis. Like, this is a problem for me because I have such and such, as if it happens in a vacuum and the bird of such and such just flew over you and pooped on you, and now you've got it and there's nothing you can do about it. And so we've got ADD and ADHD and OCD and ODD and PDD and OS and dyslexia and autism and dyspraxia and anxiety and depression and schizophrenia, and even now mass psychosis, where people are, I'm just going to go here, okay with genocide. Like, how did we get to that point where people were okay with that? It's all in the brain, and it's all linked to the gut. So today I want to take just a little bit of the research that I've done for decades and bring it to you in digestible, chewable forms. What I really love to do is take complicated things and make it super simple. So we're going to talk about the form of the gut, how it functions, how it works, and the function. So the form and the function, how it works, how we got here to the point where everybody's got a diagnosis, and what we can do about it. And I'll just tell you that this is really personal for me. For a couple of reasons. Number one, the reason that Allie mentioned was somebody whom I love very much, and the complication that he experienced that we had to heal and reverse, but also me. I was in a car wreck in August, and people who know me know that I'm just not functioning like I had been functioning. And so it's nice. Nothing ever comes looking like a gift, does it? But it is, because I'm having to go back in and relearn all of the things that I used to know so that I can heal myself, so that I can be around for my kids and my grandkids and the people who love me and the people that I love. And sometimes it's easy to forget or to downplay the importance of putting your own oxygen mask on. But mama, you got to put your own oxygen mask on. And so this is very real to me. So join me on the journey. And it starts with the gut. It's not all about the gut, but it starts with the gut. There are 3 things that are wrong with us in my paradigm. There's chemical toxicity, nutritional deficiency, and unresolved injury. And all of them play a role in everything. And we'll talk more about that later. So I've got the injury, but also there's the chemicals and there's the nutrition. And I don't only mean nutrition as in you're not eating the right food. I also mean what is being absorbed, because write this one down. You are not what you eat. You are what you digest. And everything in your brain started out on your fork or on your mother's fork or on your grandmother's fork. And now it's in your brain. And I'm going to go ahead and say it now, even though it doesn't fit, because I don't want to forget to say it later. You know how we talked about the microbiome of the gut? Well, there's a microbiome of your brain too. And it's actually the same. Whoa, right? Okay. So the form of the gut is the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. It starts at the tippity top and it goes all the way down into your spine. It goes into every area. Okay. And it's part of the enteric nervous system, sort of, kind of, and that's a whole deep dive that probably doesn't matter to us, but it involves the gastrointestinal tract. It is the two-way communication between your brain and your gut. And it is a two-way communication. And that's the thing you want to wrap your head around. And how does that happen? So the gut is telling us, should we be stressed or should we be relaxed? And then the brain is responding to that. For example, stop eating or overeat. Have you ever noticed how some people have, like when they get all stressed, they lose weight, they turn and they look like a Holocaust survivor. They turn into like 80 pounds and they're just a hot mess. Where somebody else gets stressed and all of a sudden they've gained 50 pounds and none of their clothes fit and they're miserable. And some of us are tempted to say, well, could I choose option A, Johnny? But the fact is that has to do with the gut microbiome that you have and the fact that there's this two-way communication going. Okay, so one of them is saying, hey, fight or flight, don't do anything, shut everything down, stop digesting, stop eating, stop everything. And the other one is going, oh my gosh, you're going to need carbs. You're going to need them now. You're going to need all the carbs. Go eat all the carbs so that you can run. And then, right, then you gain weight. Anyway, so it is indeed a two-way communication. Your brain is signaling to your gut whether or not it should digest. And the gut is signaling to the brain, are we in a lot of trouble or not? So think about the last time you were sitting around with friends and you had a really amazing meal and you feel so satisfied and you feel so relaxed and calm and everything is wonderful. That is when everything is working right and it's happy and you're digesting well. But if things are stressed and tense and you're eating anyway, your body isn't going to digest. Why? Because the brain is telling it you're too stressed, and the body will not digest and heal at the same time. That's another little factoid. So I'm not always a fan of the eat every hour kind of a thing, because then your body never has time to think about something else. Okay, so anyway, you got this vagus nerve and there's this two-way communication. The other form of the gut is the microbiome, and it's got bacteria and yeast, flora and fauna in it. And you want a balance of these things. It's not that you want to get rid of all bad bacteria. I don't even think that's possible. It's that you want a healthy balance and you want the good bacteria to be absolutely flourishing. When the good bacteria flourish, the bad bacteria can't do any damage. Now, we're sort of swerving immune system here, but think about what that means when we take antibiotics, okay? Because that just wipes the slate clean. And we'll talk more about antibiotics later. But anyway, so your microbiome. You also have neurotransmitters that are being produced and that are going to your brain to talk to your brain. People who have weight, now they're doing all this research, right? So they are now coming up with figuring out which bacteria in your gut are responsible for having a normal weight, which ones are responsible for having normal thought processes and not anxiety. So people who have weight challenges and anxious thoughts and depression and things like that have actually different bacteria than the people who don't have those challenges. It's all talking in your gut. And by the way, bacteria talk to each other. And here's one that will really blow your mind. Bacteria can become yeast, can become bacteria. And how do you know? Well, you don't. It comes back to how exactly do essential oils work? Well, I don't have to know. I just have to put them on my body. And that's the good news. You just get to do the right things to restore your gut. Okay, so 90 to 95% of serotonin is processed, synthesized, I think is the word I'm looking for, in the gut. Serotonin is what it regulates your mood. It makes you sleepy. It gives you the ability to feel like you're sleepy. It regulates REM sleep. It regulates digestion and wound healing and sexual desire and all kinds of things. And so it feels like, wait a minute, Laura, you're telling me that if I am lacking in any of those areas, what I really ought to do is go eat some fermented foods? Well, sort of, yeah. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But 50% of dopamine is also made in the gut. And dopamine is the thing that gets you the hit of, satisfaction. Oh, that felt really good. The pleasure, the motivation. Okay, you greens, admit it. When you've done something, you write it on your list and you check it off. Even if it wasn't on the list, admit it. What you are is a dopamine junkie. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so all of that happens in the gut. So you can see how important the gut is. And let me get to my next page. Rest and digest is the state. Yeah, there's a brain signaling of the gut. Yeah, I'll signaling the brain. Okay, yeah. Another thing that can happen in the gut is inflammation in the gut. You get inflammation in the gut and it creates cytokines that go into your brain and tell you everything is wrong, and it will attack your brain. So inflammation in the gut, bad. The other thing that can happen in the gut with the form and function is leaky gut. Who's heard of leaky gut? Probably everybody now. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when we were starting this, nobody had heard of leaky gut. It was pseudoscience. It was cray and cracked. They're finally starting to understand that it's a thing. Well, here's what happens. You can get an imbalance of yeast. This can happen a lot of ways. We'll talk about some of the ways that this can happen. But if you get an imbalance in yeast are not benign. They turn into these little boars, and they bore holes in the lining of your gut, the mucosal lining of your gut, which is only one cell thick. And then the normal foods that you eat escape out of your gut, go into your bloodstream, cause mass inflammation all throughout your body, and also are attacked as foreign invaders, and we call that an allergy. So the gut is very, very important. Emotions have two components. They have your brain component and your gut component. When you sleep, and Gary Young used to talk about the importance of sleep and how your body, quote, processes things while you sleep. Your gut is processing emotions while you're sleeping. And it's making sense of all of those things that did not make sense during the day. That's what your gut is doing. So ought you to eat and then go right to sleep at night? Probably not. Go ahead and give your gut a break and don't eat late at night. Just saying. Okay. Now, before we get to function, there's a company called Viome, and they have like 100,000 people's poop. And what they're doing is studying the poop. Now, when back 20 years ago, when I talked about fermented vegetables, and we had a little fermented vegetable factory in our home, and we used to hawk this at farmers markets and teach everybody we knew about the gut microbiome, I would say that there are 1,000 different strains of bacteria. They've only named 400 of them. They only know what 50 of them do. Well, this Viome company has added 10,000 new species to the database, which is amazing. This whole world of untapped knowledge is out there. It's like, why do we go to the moon when we could be studying the gut? I told you there's a microbiome inside the brain, and it's the same species that live in the gut. Here's what's important. Diversity is important. Having a lot of different kinds of gut flora is important. Okay, so let's talk about the function. Nutrient absorption. You are what you digest, not you are what you eat. And so your gut has to be able to break everything down. This vicious cycle happens in your gut where there's damage, and we'll talk about why you get the damage later. So there's damage in the gut, and then it doesn't fully process and digest all of your food. And then you've got food that doesn't process, that putrefies. So anything that doesn't get digested just putrefies. And then the bad bacteria come along and they eat the putrefied stuff, and then they multiply, and then they do more damage. You see? So it becomes this vicious cycle. And so you used to be able to eat everything, and suddenly you can't eat dairy without all of this gut problem. And then you can't eat gluten, and then you can't eat this. And everybody's going, oh my gosh, I must just have to go gluten-free. Not necessarily. What if you could heal it, not just avoid those things for the rest of your life? But the first thing at the top of the villi, so your gut is supposed to look like a shag carpet from the 70s, not like a linoleum floor. But the damage happens at the top of the villi, that's the shag carpet. And the tippity top is dairy. That's why that's usually the first thing that people have a problem with. Now I'm getting to where the gut gets in here, or where the brain connects here. But this is why, just as an aside, you can be exposed to something. One person is exposed to, I don't know, like strep throat, and they're fine. They don't get it. And it can even live in there. If you go swab people's throats, a whole bunch of people are going to have strep throat, even though they don't have the symptoms. But somebody else gets exposed to it. Yes, thank you for the raw dairy. Yes, Allie. Somebody else gets exposed to it, and they go down because it proliferates. Why? Because it's eating all the bad stuff. Well, that's what's going on in your gut. The other thing that can go on with the malabsorption is with the yeast. So fermentation can happen in the gut. So you take your kid, who should be a normal, functioning, healthy child, and you feed them sugar and yeast, and they get a yeast overgrowth, and then they ferment things in the gut. Well, what is that going to send to their brain? Alcohol. It's like they're high. They're not bad, they're high. So we need to take a look at what they're eating. So yes, that two-way communication comes in. Okay, so the gut also processes emotions. They have both the gut component and the brain component, and the synthesis and regulation of neurotransmitters and excrete waste, among other things. But that's the function of the gut. So how did we get here? We got here where everybody's got an osis, several different ways. The first thing is C-sections. So back in the day, C-sections were rare, and they should have been a 2 to 3% C-section rate. There should be a 2 to 3% C-section rate. If the body is healthy and everything else is healthy, 2 to 3% of the time it goes wrong. And it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's things like placenta previa. Okay. It's really big deal stuff. Should be C-sections. But we've got a 33% C-section rate in this country. And when you have a C-section, the baby coming through doesn't get the bacteria out of the birth canal. There it is. And so some doctors now are getting wise, and they're swabbing the birth canal and then wiping it in the baby's mouth. Amen. Yes, that needs to happen. But better yet, because God created the birth canal, better yet to go ahead and use the birth canal. And I do not blame women. They are the victims of a society whose doctors have been misinformed and poorly trained. It is not the women's fault. In fact, they are usually the ones who are brutalized in the whole process and have trauma and need to heal. But in the meantime, we are disrupting the gut bacteria. Diet. Remember those 3 things that causes everything? Nutritional deficiency, chemical toxicity, and unresolved injury. So diet, eating the same stuff all the time, because the microbiome, in order to flourish, needs a whole bunch of different things feeding it. We will talk about let's just talk now, probiotics and prebiotics. So probiotics are fantastic, and Young Living has a fantastic probiotic. But if I had to pick probiotics or prebiotics, I hate making this choice, but prebiotics are the thing that most people don't know about that really, really, really is important. And if you would eat different species of prebiotics, you would have a healthier gut microbiome. So forgetting the word, but a diet that is all the same thing all the time. Number 2 is bad wheat. And Gary talks about this in his book. And by the way, Gary Young is a genius. I knew this outside of Young Living. And then I came to Young Living and started listening to Gary. And I'm like, oh my word, he discovered this too. Our einkorn is amazing. That's the grain that we all really ought to be eating if we can still process wheat. You might need to heal the gut and then come back to the einkorn, but if you can process any kind of a grain at all, einkorn is where it's at. There's a whole book called Wheat Belly, and I've forgotten who wrote that book, but Wheat Belly, that talks about how the GMO nasty wheat that we have of today isn't actually a food, and it's damaging our guts. We talked about the yeast overgrowth that can damage the gut. And we stopped eating fermented vegetables. And the reason we stopped is because we got refrigeration, and everybody decided that grandmama was crazy and they knew more than grandma. So they weren't going to have to bother with that, because you could ferment foods with vinegar and it was just as good and faster and right there on the shelf. So we stopped doing that. Antibiotics in your meat, antibiotics in your dairy, antibiotics in your water, antibiotics in taking the antibiotics, because they said that you had something that needed antibiotics and you didn't understand about terrain theory versus germ theory. So you went ahead and took those antibiotics, and it wiped your microbiome of the good bacteria, because antibiotics don't just kill bad bacteria, they kill good bacteria too. So that's how we got here. The good news is that we can fix this. So Lori, what you're telling me is the problem with my extreme anxious thoughts is that we got refrigeration. Yes, that is part of what I'm telling you. So prebiotics are the gut bacteria, are what feeds the gut bacteria. It's the fiber that we don't digest, and it feeds the good bacteria. The magical number, according to recent research, is 30 different kinds of prebiotics. Now, Young Living has a fantastic prebiotic supplement that I highly recommend and love myself. And Ningxia Red And wolfberries are a prebiotic. Other prebiotics, carrots, beets, blueberries, cabbage, seeds, spices, herbs, onions, greens, garlic, leeks, arugula, bananas, cauliflower, name it. Okay, those are prebiotics. So you don't want to eat broccoli morning, noon, and night. You want to diversify. And this is my little advertisement for fermenting all kinds of vegetables. Yes, you can ferment more than just cabbage, and we'll talk about that. I really need to do a master class on that. It's one more thing I got to do. I'll get around to it. I will. All right, so prebiotics feed the probiotics. Probiotics are the healthy bacteria that are in your gut. It's best to take them on an empty stomach. So if you just think, and you don't need that much, you just need 1 to 2 tablespoons, so a couple of bites before every meal. That will really rock your world. If you're on a fast, consider drinking the juice, a little bit of juice on the fast, because the juice is also full of probiotics. Now, this is commercial probiotic food because mine was downstairs and I got lazy. So this is wild brine. Another commercial product is Bubby's. I like Bubby's. Okay, it'll do the trick. I don't love the flavor of the Bubby's. I like the wild brine, but the very best thing to do is to probably go to your local farmer's market and find somebody who is selling, and here's the terminology you're looking for, lacto fermented. Lacto fermented means it is fermented with salt. I know, and just make it, please. Yes. It's fermented with salt, and it is the lactic acid that's doing the trick, not acidic acid. If it has vinegar in it, that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for raw lacto fermented, and it really is easy. And at this point, people often reach out to me, oh my gosh, Lori, but I need a recipe. Give me your recipe. I'm like, it's not hard. You cut up the cabbage, you put it in a bowl, you mash it, you pound it, you salt it with the right kind of salt, which is, I hear Himalayan works, but I've never used it. I use Celtic sea salt. And then you pound it, you mash it, and then you stick it in a jar, put a lid on it, put it on your countertop. Okay. So, but there are recipes out there that tell you how much salt to use for how many pounds of cabbage. They're out there. Just believe them. More salt is better than too little salt. So what's really going on with the fermentation is that everything that, God is so smart, everything that you need to ferment the food is on the food. The reason you're putting salt on there is to keep the bad bacteria from proliferating long enough for the good bacteria to grow. That's it. That's what the salt is for. So you've got to get organic, because that still wasn't treated with all of the chemicals. And then you can just make your own, and you can ferment carrots. We used to sell dilly carrots. We sold dilly carrots like crazy. Green beans, beets are amazing also for your gallbladder, but that's an aside. Okay, so they're best on an empty stomach before food. Take your probiotics. Something else. Oh yes. Okay. So I believe in probiotic supplements like Young Living's Life 9. Most supplements out there have 3 or 4 different kinds of bacteria. So there's 2 different differentiators on bacteria. There's number of bacteria and there's kind of bacteria. So people get confused between those things. They're looking at it going, oh, there's a million bacteria in here. This is good. Well, it's that's the number of bacteria. But what you're especially looking for is what kind of bacteria. And like I said, the researchers are discovering this one keeps you from gaining weight. This one helps with your brain, whatever. I don't want to think about it. I just want to take them. So our probiotic has 9 in there. If you eat properly prepared sauerkraut, it has 1,000. So in terms of different strains, if you're looking for different strains, yes, you can take a probiotic. I also don't think you have to take one every day. I just don't. I would do it at night before bed, or on an empty stomach. But I don't think you necessarily have to do it every day. But if you're, in addition to that, I would say get on your fermented foods. The other thing is 4 to 6 ounces of fermented vegetables have 10 trillion bacteria in it. Supplements tend to be measured in the billions. So there's this whole world out there. Okay, so the prebiotics, number is 30, probiotics, just eat your probiotics, eat your ferments. Okay, next thing you can do to help heal your gut is number 3, decrease your inflammation, because inflammation in the gut is going to mess with your brain. That means no sugar, no processed foods. Again, back to the accident. What happened was I just went down. And I wasn't cooking like I normally cooked, and I wasn't eating how I normally ate. And I wasn't doing the supplements I normally took. And it became a vicious cycle where I couldn't think to cook and I couldn't think to do anything else. So I was eating whatever I was eating, like if it was in a box or whatever, processed. And it had a huge impact on my ability to function and think, and the anxiety level, right, and the depression level, frankly. So no sugar, no processed foods. Ningxia Red is amazing, good for you. Ningxia Red has L-glutamine in it. L-glutamine is one of the things you can use to heal your gut. And if you want to do a whole diet, consider the bone broth diet and or the GAPS diet, GAPS, gut and psychology syndrome. The GAPS diet came from, what is her name? Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, who looked at, I'm pushing all the wrong buttons. Get back. Who looked at the SCD diet, specific carbohydrate diet, that had been effective for people with celiac, Crohn's, diverticulitis, diverticulosis, all of the gut things, and said, I wonder if this would be effective for things too. And did the research, and yes, it is effective for brain things too. The GAPS diet is not to be undertaken lightly. Give yourself a lot of grace and take a lot of time to get prepared for it, but it can be instantly soothing. You will know it immediately in how you're thinking. Number 4, lower your stress. Start saying no to some things. Number 5, help your digestion with the enzymes and the probiotics. Enzymes are really important for digestion because remember, what you don't digest putrefies, and then that feeds bad bacteria, which sends bad signals to your brain about all kinds of things they ought not be thinking about. I was reading that now the ERs are full of children who are wanting to do harm to themselves to the point where they are not around anymore. Like, what have we done? Antibiotics. Everybody's working. Nobody's taking the time to make decent food. We gave up, like all those things we talked about. That's what's going on. In my never to be humble, I'm not a doctor opinion. Okay. Number 6, sleep. Your body heals during sleep. You need to be asleep by 9 o'clock, 9:30 at the latest. Your body processes the emotions during the sleep. And if you had 1 hour extra in your day, if somebody could wave a magic wand and say you have an extra hour, what are you going to do with it? Well, you could do this and this and this and this and this and this and this, but what you really ought to do is say, I will sleep with that extra hour. I will go to bed early, and when I wake up naturally, it's good enough. And if I need to take a nap, I take a nap. Number 7 is fecal transplant. It's on the bleeding edge. The bleeding edge, pay a whole lot of money for it, but I wanted to throw it out there so that you could start thinking, oh my word, there's really something to this. Yes, there is something to this. They take healthy bacteria from one person and they like freeze dry it and stuff. You're not going to taste poop. It's not like you're eating poop. But it can absolutely transform somebody's gut. There actually is a lot of research right now going on in autism with fecal transplants. Number 8 is to just heal your gut. And let me tell you one other fast way to do it. and this is new. This wasn't back there. Oh, well, I'll tell you the old stuff first and then I'll leave you with a, okay. Eat more fat, eat good fat, eat saturated fat. I said it with my outside voice. Eat coconut oil, eat lard, eat tallow, eat schmaltz. Schmaltz is the stuff that comes off of chickens, schmaltzy. Avocados are good. Stay away from cooking with olive oil. You can eat olive oil, but don't cook with it, because when you heat an oil past where it ought to be heated, and you'll know it because it starts smoking, you have just turned it rancid. That's why you don't want roasted nuts. You want raw nuts, actually, that have been soaked and then freeze and then dried. But that's just really important, because the inflammation in your gut sends all the crazy signals to your brain. Eat more fat. I told you about L-glutamine. All right, and I've told you about the GAPS diet and the bone broth diet. Here's another fast way to do it. If you don't, they have discovered and named the kind of bacteria that eats your microbiome and replenishes it. And it's called Akkermansia, Akkermansia. It eats the microbiome. I mean, the lining, it eats the mucosal lining is what I meant to say. And then it replenishes it. Would you like to know what makes it kick into gear? Y'all said now? Fasting. Fasting makes it kick into gear. When you haven't eaten, it wakes up and it says, hey, we got nothing to do. I think we should eat the mucosal lining and replenish it. And it does. So intermittent fasting, other kinds of fasting, you can look all into that. Now, let's talk about essential oils. We've talked about a couple of Young Living products, but essential oils. We talked about reducing stress. What do you know that helps you reduce stress? We talked about the importance of sleep. What do you know that can help you sleep? We talked about the importance of digestion. What do you know that helps you digest? We talked about not having fermentation going on in the gut. What do you know that helps prevent fermentation in the gut? Digest for that one, hashtag. Okay. Use your oils, use all of your oils. I could take a deep dive into the specific brain oils and all of that, but I wanted to really connect the gut brain connection for you. And I think that I'm out of time, and it's easier to go research which oils do I use for my brain. But I'll tell you one that I didn't know, awaken. If there's been any kind of trauma, awaken. I thought that was kind of amazing when I learned that from Dr. Jess. So anyway, that's my presentation. I hope I didn't go too long, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you guys want to go, then peace out.
That was so good, Lori. I want to just ask you about enzymes. Do you want to speak a little bit on those?
Sure. Everything in your body needs an enzyme to do. Everything from thinking to blinking requires enzymes. So if you're not thinking clearly, you need more enzymes. You're born with a bank account of enzymes, and they get used up doing the metabolic processes that are normal. It's normal to use them up. But if you don't have any more coming in, then your bank account gets depleted. And by the time you're 50, half of your enzymes are typically gone. And you can take our enzymes. We have fantastic enzymes. I steer clear of just staying on one enzyme. I like all of the enzymes. They all have different names. And yes, they're targeted for targeted purposes, but more is better. And so I like all of those enzymes. The other thing that happens with fermented foods is the enzyme count goes up. When you ferment a food, the bioavailability of the vitamins goes up. That's why James Cook took it to Australia when he on a ship, because it would prevent scurvy because of the vitamin C that becomes bioavailable when you ferment it, and also the enzyme count. So enzymes are in raw fruits and vegetables, and they're in the food, like Ali mentioned, the raw dairy. The raw dairy has the enzyme in the dairy that you need to digest the dairy. Isn't that amazing and spectacular how that works? So yes, we all need our enzymes for clearer thinking. Does that do the trick, or is there more?
All right, I'm going to stop the recording, and if there's any other questions, we can go from there.